This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Here now, Tony Bruschi.
If you've been following the Kohberger case, you know he's a man who builds his identity out of borrowed parts. He's not an original. He's a collage. A little BTK in his methodology, a bit of Bundy's charm and control fantasy, a cold prep of Israel Keys, even nods to fictional killers like Norman Bates or Patrick Bateman in American Psycho. It's all stitched together in a persona that feels calculated and quite honestly also very hollow. It's not exactly a stretch to think that if BTK had a hidey hole for trophies and Keys had caches buried in the wilderness, Kohberger might try his own version. Only with him, the question isn't just what's in it, it's when he started it. Was this a pre-crime creation? Or a long-term fantasy? Or did it grow out of smaller, earlier, deviant acts, like the suspected break-ins we now see mentioned in court documents and books? Robin Dreeke, retired FBI special agent, former chief of the Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program, sees a behavioral arc here. Escalation that starts with trespassing and theft builds towards violence and leaves behind physical markers, and those markers may not just be the knife from the Idaho 4. They could include ID cards in a glove box, other items taken from other places, maybe even tools meant for more than one crime. And that leads to the bigger question. If such a cache exists, where would it be? These aren't playground parks we're talking about. They're sprawling, wooded areas with trails, river bends, dead tree stumps, and in this case, documented patterns of Kohberger visiting them before the murders. Patterns we can match against how Keys, Robert Hansen, and BTK all concealed items near water for quick disposal, off trails but still accessible, hidden just enough to evade discovery while remaining within reach for the offender. And then there's the shovel, not a snow shovel you'd toss in a trunk in case you get stuck. A dig a hole, move some dirt kind of shovel. Found with soil on it. Soil that investigators tested, but never publicly tied to a location. So we're going to get into this with Robin. We're going to wonder and ask, when you look at his vehicle history, his park visits, his shovel, his habit of borrowing from other killers' playbooks, what is your read on this sort of thing? And if this knife, maybe more, might be buried out there as a hidden archive of crimes, or has law enforcement already decided? It's up to the rest of us to figure that out. Let's get into it.
Yeah, well, all these things are that escalation of that life arc that he had, and even the break-ins the suspected break-ins that he was tied to or potentially tied to that are coming out in the court release documents. That just confirms more of what was suspected, and that all these people back in his hometown in Pennsylvania are putting together after the fact too. That came out in Patterson's book. So that's just following an arc of just deviant, unhealthy behavior that typically does come about with these type of people in the murder realm. What was interesting too was the idea of, and it's been confirmed even more so with the court documents being released, that they still have not found any, even though I know Howard Bloom thinks it was all about the one girl. There's still no conclusive. Yeah, there's still no conclusive link between him and any of the victims. And as we now know, he had bought that K-bar knife prior to his going out to Idaho for school.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're looking at, and he'd started studying criminology before going out to Idaho. So if you're looking at that arc, I think it was always in his mind to do this for quite some time. And so that's why going out there and laying down a cache before he even selected a venue and individuals possibly is exactly because that's what Keys did. He was opportunistic, creating a cache for something he's going to be using when the time comes for him to use it. And I really think that that's a probability of this happening here. Because so let's just go law of probability. Sometimes you can be off and sometimes be on with me on laws of probability. But when you come down to Kohberger's behavior, again, the research I did, everything he did in the execution of this completely aligns with 4 other people. We said it, Dennis Rader, Bundy, Keyes, and Papa Roger, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with that, the only things that do, so it's easy now, let's look at what doesn't align. The only things that happened that did not align with something that someone else emulated ahead of time is leaving 2 victims, because that it was not part of his plan, right? Leaving a nice sheet behind, and returning to the scene of the crime so soon after. Because I found that interesting. They said that returning to the scene of the crime is like, how could that be new? How could that be original? Actually, it's the idea of return to scene of the crime wasn't original. So soon after the event was the part that kind of broke a norm from that pattern. So if you're looking at everything he did, there's only those 3 things that stand out that are outside the pattern of what he's emulated in someone else. So why wouldn't getting rid of the weapon be the same?
Yeah, I mean, and the thing, I mean, there's a lot of killers that he could have emulated where they did throw it into a river, but the fact that we see that he goes to these parks in terms of his vehicle patterns, and that's the big question, because I don't know how far back they looked at these vehicle patterns. They obviously did for some amount of time where they could tell that he was stalking them. I just wonder how far it goes back. I mean, does it go back even further than what they looked at? Because I think there's a big possibility that there is something in these parks, other than knowing the fact that he hit these parks before the crime, and he would go there quite frequently from his other vehicle activity. How do we begin to think about where in the park these things might be located? These are big areas of space, as all parks are. They're very wooded. They're not just like, hey, here's the park on the corner with a playground. This is like wooded area, hiking trail type territory. I guess my thought would be look back to Israel Keyes, look back to Robert Hansen, look back to BTK, the types of places maybe they would have hid things, or more so in that sort of atmosphere. How do we get down to where, if somebody wants to try and find this, how do they go about doing it?
Yeah, so I did that. And again, I don't have real-time data because I'm not there.
Sure.
But when you do that overlays, the typical place that Keyes would do these things is bends in rivers. They always near water because it allows you to secrete it in a hiding place as well as dispose it in that body of water if you chose to do that as well in a last-minute boo-boo, right?
Yeah.
But also you want it to be easy to access and explain away on your typical route, but also not frequented by other people. That's why these parks, these walking trails, there's lots of probability of those being the locations. And when looking at these, and so bring it to the spirals, as you mentioned Hansen, we were given, I remember this was so funny. We were given tips by defector sources, high-level Russian defector sources, of where they had caches that so what happens is when you have a Russian illegal, when a Russian illegal is placed in our country, years and decades in advance of ever being needed, typically what they're doing is they're placed in this country just in case things sour between us and that nation in Russia, and we kick all the diplomats out. We kick all the diplomats out of the diplomatic establishment. What happens is Russia will activate their illegals network to continue collecting intelligence outside of the normal pattern. And in order to do that, they have to first go to a cache of cache, information, coding equipment, transmission, a cache of trade craft that allows them to act in those capacities. And actually, we had information that told us where those caches were. And if you say, because this is, oh my God, I've dug so many holes in parks. Because
you literally have.
I have. And so what happens is they typically say it's down this trail approximately 200 feet next to a dead tree stump. Go. Yeah. I can tell you, you try digging around a dead tree stump about 200 feet down, you're going to wind up digging 500 holes and not finding anything. So that's a long answer, a Robin Dreeke answer of saying it's got to be an obvious place as well, obvious for him to be able to find again. That's why it's an actual bend in the river. It's got to be a part of nature that is immobile, and will be there for a period of time to trigger a memory so he can actually dig it up again, but also not so obvious that someone else would. So I was looking. That's why you saw me scrolling. I was looking for the sites. There's about 5 sites that overlaid that I did with the research between where Keys buried his and actually in the park itself. And one of I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I'm going to try to dig them up now, but yes, I have 5 locations where I think there's the highest probability. And because the police, I have no idea because they haven't released exactly where anyone has actually searched before. And the challenge, and I know they analyzed the dirt on the shovel that he found, and it was inconclusive on. They didn't say whether it led to anything or not.
And that's a big piece of this, the shovel itself.
Yeah.
I mean, let's talk about
that. See, he had a shovel.
Because that's what really kind of starts us. Not only the fact that he's on the map going to these parks, but the fact that there's a shovel, and it's not a snow shovel. It's a literal, let's dig a hole in the ground shovel. It's not crap, I got stuck on the side of the road, let me dig out of the snow. So, and there's dirt. So they did try to do some sort of a evaluation of the soil and compare it to different areas. I don't know that was very conclusive. At least they didn't release it, as far as we know, anything at this moment in time about, this might be where it is. But they clearly had it in their mind. Is this something that they would still be even looking for in an investigative technique or an investigative platform, or is this now pretty much up to the true crime community? If you want to find the knife, the investigation is done. We're not looking for it anymore because it doesn't really matter at this point in terms of prosecution.
Boy, that's a tough question. I'm thinking it's going to be up to the true crime community more so, only because law enforcement departments have limited bandwidth. And if you have other things you have to work on, and this guy's already serving 4 life sentences behind the bars, and you already got the conviction, the resources, energy to kind of look for that, it's going to be limited. The other thing too, I wanted to mention too, is you were talking about the cell phone data. I don't know how far back the subpoena went to get the cell phone traffic. A lot, because anytime you get anytime you're using an intrusive technique like collecting cell phone information, whether content or just triangulation and getting pings, you have to be able to justify to a judge as to this is reasonable amount of time for this. And I don't know if it went back to his entire time since he moved to Idaho. I would think they could probably justify it. If not back then, they could definitely justify now just the things we talked about on this podcast right here would be enough for a judge to sign off and get more cell phone data.
I would think if they're trying to look into possible other crimes at this point, and that's where I think it's valuable, where it might not be anything. I mean, it'd be lovely to find it, but at the same point, it's not going to affect his life sentence. He's gone. It's there. It's done. What Robin's describing isn't just a hiding place. It's a behavioral signature, a pattern of thinking where evidence isn't discarded. It's curated. If Kohberger built a cache, it would fit right in. With his apparent need to emulate the killers he studied. BTK with his hidey hole, Keys with his waterproof murder kits, Hansen with his remote weapon stashes. The location itself would be part of the performance. Remote enough to avoid hikers, close enough for a plausible excuse, and familiar enough to find it again in the dark. It's tempting to think of this as purely academic, a thought exercise for true crime obsessives. After all, Kohberger is serving 4 consecutive life sentences. Prosecutors don't need the knife to keep him there. Law enforcement has limited resources, and hunting for a buried weapon in acres of forest might not rank high on their to-do list anymore, which is exactly why, if it exists, it might sit undisturbed for years. But the stakes go beyond a single knife. If that box or bag contains IDs, clothing, or other items linked to unsolved break-ins or assaults, it's not just about the Idaho 4 anymore. It's about whether his cache could point to crimes that never made headlines and whether anyone is still looking for them. Robin's point about cell data is worth remembering, too. We don't know how far back investigators pulled his location records. Did they map his routes all the way from the day he arrived in Washington, or just the months before the murders? The answer could mean the difference between knowing which spots he visited dozens of times and never realizing they mattered until it was too late. And the shovel? Even without a clear soil match, it's a physical reminder that burying something was at least in his operational vocabulary. It's hard to square that with the idea of him casually tossing a knife in a river and calling it a night. In the end, whether this cache is real or just another dark possibility, it leaves us with the same lingering thought. If it's out there, it's part of the story that he's still telling himself, a secret only he knows for now. And if history, with men like BTK and Keyes telling us everything, secrets like that have a way of leaking out, piece by piece, when the need for attention outweighs the need to keep them buried, if he can stay alive. That's the big question. As I said earlier, Bryan, if you got something to share, you might want to do it now, because you're only going to stay in solitary for so long. And once you're out of that, the future's so bright you got to wear shades, as in, people wearing shades in black to a funeral. Although I don't think many people are going to show up to yours. And probably not in black either. There might be a party going on that scene. Tell me what your thoughts are in the comment section on YouTube, if that's where you are right now. If you've not joined us on YouTube yet, please check us out there. Search Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. You can, of course, also get us wherever you get podcasts. Do that same search there and press subscribe so you don't miss any of our coverage on this case and the many that we cover for you right here at the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today. But let us know your thoughts in the comment section. Really looking forward to that. Until next time, my name's Tony Bruschi. We will talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Bruschi and the Hidden Killers podcast.